Good morning, everybody. We are here on Friday morning, the 15th of October. Morning in the UK, morning to everyone who's not in the UK dialing in, and welcome. We are live on Facebook, YouTube and LinkedIn. We talk about what's going on for us and our clients and the world of work in terms of humanising work. So really looking forward to the next half an hour chat. Ant, it's lovely to see you this morning. How are you?
I'm well, yeah, can't complain. It feels like about 2 minutes ago, and it wasn't 2 minutes ago, it was Monday, when I was going, right team, these are the fun, exciting things that are going to happen this week, and they've all been on very quickly. But yeah, otherwise, all good.
Well, so what are we going to talk about this morning? I'm just sharing a stat for us to start thinking about in terms of what I'm hearing at the moment from everyone I speak to. We are facing such an interesting employment market world of work right now. 57.3% turnover rate for both 2020 and 2021 from an average of 15%. And I think this is just really kind of setting the context for what is going on and what do our people really, what would they value? What's the most important thing right now to help organizations, leaders think about where they're focusing their attention when there's so much to do? So, there's tons of things we can do. We have to sharply prioritize what we're absolutely going to focus on, because clearly whatever we had in place in terms of retention, engagement, well-being may have been absolutely appropriate for pre-pandemic, but it's not happening now. And the great resignation is taking place. There is a lot of shifting going on. Why? And what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And a lot of the people that sign in and look at this will be leaders of an organization, CEOs, or just leaders of departments. And I guess one of the feelings that when I looked at this and I went, oh my goodness, but we already do so much. What could we possibly do more? And lots of companies have done some amazing things over the last 18 months, including a lot around well-being, as we know. But as you say, it's obviously not quite enough, or maybe it's the wrong thing or the wrong type of thing, or maybe things have just subtly changed in the last 6 months. And as things have opened up again, we're starting to, certainly here in the UK, what do we need to be focusing on now? It's not to say that we've necessarily been doing wrong stuff. It's just, what do we need to maybe be doing new and different or subtly different now? And I think it's a great conversation to have. And we touched on it in a number of these sessions, but I think there's some really cool practical things that we can take away from today.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here, and as you know, I love pioneering new stuff. I love shiny new things, and I'm not alone either. I know there's lots of leaders out there who love reading a new article and thinking, right, I'll go and apply that straight away. And actually, when things take years to implement and to build into people's strategies, it's very difficult to do those things and to be that agile, particularly for large organisations. But mass innovation at scale is required here, and ripping up the rule book slightly. So I've talked about it before, actually, in many different kind of events and seminars that I've done and spoken about with people. And I wonder how many people are actually sitting down, looking at everything they've got on their desk today and saying, what should we stop doing? Because we're all doing a lot. And I think there's an element of, we're not going to be able to do the really great, big, wonderful things that we need to sharply focus on if we're just spread so thinly trying to do everything. And they won't stand out because they'll just be one of a plethora of things. We don't need a one size fits all, and we don't need something that's made for every single individual in organizations. It can't possibly work on a large scale. What is the in-between? And I think that's where we must challenge ourselves. What's the innovation for the in-between space, where we need to think about, for large organizations, what do we need to do right now? Because we're going to be over reliant on individuals, high performing individuals, through this tumultuous time. And those individuals will have specific relationships with clients and customers that will be about that individual and will be less and less about the brand. So where does the brand then stand? What does an iconic brand mean if it's actually down to the individual relationships that high performers take with them wherever they go?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, isn't it? That I know a lot of CEOs, senior leaders are asking. It's, do we want to be pushing for high performance, or do we want to just be pushing for a bit of stability and a bit of kind of groundedness in the team? You know, and sometimes we know that too much focus, and we talk about the war for talent. And typically when we talk about the war for talent, we don't just mean resource. Generally, we talk about the war for high performing talent. And when you look at this turnover rate, you can obviously see it's not just high performers that is in that. But typically when we talk about turnover rate, we are talking about those regretted losses and those high performers. Well, I guess a question would be, what can we do with the team that maybe isn't classed as a high performer? Because actually, maybe we're doing something wrong here with them, or maybe there's untapped potential. And we know this, and statistically, you can't have everyone a high performer, because statistically that wouldn't work on the bell curve. But we need to make sure that we're doing something maybe subtly different with those that aren't the standout people that we always are trying to grasp onto. Maybe it's more about the team dynamic, more about everyone as an individual and creating that stability across the team.
Absolutely. And recognizing the individual contribution and value of every single individual, more so than maybe we do now. And I see that in organizations a lot. And I think that's what we're seeing people saying, actually, I'm a bit bored. Been doing this for a while, a bit stressed, been through a difficult time, under-resourced. You know, why wouldn't I take the leap? Why wouldn't I shift to another organization, especially if they're going to give me a little bit more money? So how much are we caring about our existing people and supporting them to realize their potential? And I think this is, that's not a new question. It's just become more important now than ever before with this amount of turnover, because we've kind of been able to manage it before at 15% turnover, but 57%, where is the organizational knowledge being held?
Yeah.
How do we capture all of that systems and digitally? Are we losing the fabric of the organization? And particularly, as I said, I'm coming back continuously to the brand. What is going on with brands when this much turnover is happening? How can organizations keep hold of the depth that they've brilliantly created behind their brands, and keep it in simplicity that a fluctuating workforce can represent just as well? And I think that's such a huge challenge, more so, as I said, more so now for large organizations than ever. Are we going to see this downhill for the large organizations and their brands in terms of what they're focusing on? And how will they then, when they're even more challenged, how will they then retain their people through what may be to come?
Yeah, and obviously we're generalizing here, because I know a lot of companies that are equally, and we know this and we've said it a lot of times, there are a lot of companies that are kind of doing this and are doing really well and aren't having this problem at all. So I guess what we're trying to do here is talk about the general state. I read an interesting thing, and obviously it's different data, I don't know how it relates, but the recent Microsoft study said that actually over 2/3 of people who would have a great conversation with their manager would actually stay rather than leave. So if all it can take is one conversation, what that conversation is around, and there's a few things in Harvard Business Review this week, but actually having those mentor conversations, who can I connect you with that would help you stretch and grow in your role? And you mentioned, people stagnating in role. How can we help people stretch and grow in area of strength where they can feel that natural excitement again? But obviously that's really difficult when you go, well, I haven't got time to do my role as it is. And so then it's a case of reprioritizing. We're getting asked a lot about time management at the moment. How do we build skills to help people have the time to do the things and refocus and reframe on the things that are really important? But you've just touched on a really important point, and I've been thinking about this even in our team. where there's change and there's growth and there's expansion in our team. How do you make sure that everyone's learning and continuously learning? And how do you make sure that you capture the essence of the brand as you scale, even when you're looking at remote teams and you're looking at virtual teams, hybrid teams, and how do you capture that brand essence, the thing that makes you uniquely different as a business? And how do you also make sure that you can capture, as you've quite rightly said, the individual's uniqueness in that brand? Everyone's going to represent that brand in a very unique way. And I think that's really important. That's what we mean by the human experience. You're bringing your true self to the organization. And I think that's really important. But if you lose that brand essence, that golden thread, it can be quite damaging.
It's like letting loose.
Yeah.
It's like letting loose the brand. And almost like we need to be careful what we wish for. If everyone's creating such brilliant relationships with individuals within the organization, how do we capture and grasp the actual essence of the brand? And I'm presuming that is top of mind for people in terms of the strong connection between brand and culture. You know, that brand lives partly because of the culture that's been created in the organization. And we hear a lot from our clients, particularly this week. How do we maintain our culture when we've got so many new people coming through, when we're not meeting up in the same way that we were before? Things are more digital. Everything's kind of been thrown to the wind. And yet we're still push on performance in terms of having those great client relationships and delivery and experience. And I think it's coming back to me. I know we talk a lot about the word human, but I'm wondering whether the word experience is actually as equally important. And we need to really examine and understand what we mean by experience all over the place. I saw an article about, should there be chief experience officers now rather than CEOs? And I'm sitting there thinking, that experience part is what you're creating for clients, for customers, for partners, for people. What is the essence of experience, and how do people create that differently, or influence that, or mold it and shape it in a way that suits where the organization needs to go? And this level is way beyond the demand we've ever had for it previously.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Would anyone change their job title to chief experience officers? But it's, and a lot of people are right in the sense that, I think they're right in the sense that it's about creating the culture and experience. That's the role of a senior leader. I also, though, and we've talked about this a few times, I think that's the responsibility of not just a leader, that's the responsibility of everyone. What organization do you, and it's kind of a chance to look in the mirror, what kind of organization do you want to be a part of, and what are you contributing to help build that culture and that experience? And of course, when we talk about experience, we talk about felt experience and remembered experience, but remembered experience almost isn't good enough right now because people are leaving. It's the felt experience, the everyday connection with people. That one conversation may be the difference between someone looking for a job and finding that opportunity and not. So how are you making sure that your human is switched on, like you were saying last week? And I think that's great. But also, how are our leaders role modeling those behaviors? And we were talking about that again last week, because that experience is so important right now.
It is, isn't it? And if you think if you think about conversations, I can pick out a few of those really great conversations that actually changed how I felt about the individual, about myself, about my experience. We all know when we've had a conversation that really changes us in some way. And for the positive or the negative, it's about being able to do that really, really well. And that is the human bit, isn't it? That's the bit that actually we all know what it is. It's just we can't quite articulate in concrete skills what's that piece, because it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the difference. Yeah, I don't know. That's the difference for me, isn't it, between process and management and leadership, though. And the leadership bit is how are you making people feel, and you can't necessarily put words in that. It's a difficult thing to compartmentalize. We've, of course, we know what skills and we can break down what skills you need to be able to have those types of conversations. But it's a very difficult thing to put into context, I think.
I think you're right. And one of the things I've talked about throughout all my kind of work in leadership has been about really listening to our intuition and our inner voice. And I think it's a fascinating subject, because when you come down to actually saying to people, tell me what intuitively do you want to do about this? What is your gut telling you? That is the thing that we should be listening to as much as possible, because that's come from our lifetime wisdom. That's knowledge, skills, strengths, experience, challenge, everything that we're made up of as a human being, and our experience of being a human living thing. And we need to be able to turn the volume up on that, because it has credence, it has strong value. And I talk about it a lot, particularly for young female leaders, because I, certainly from my own experience, I recognize, being in situations where inside, this voice is screaming, saying, no, you can't do that, that's terrible. And I'm sitting there with a deadpan face going, and you're thinking, no, this just can't be. But there's so many things and barriers that get in the way. Often it's the politics, often it's, complications around what the consequences and considerations of what you're going to say means. But we do actually know. And yet still, for some reason, we don't validate that intuition enough. We talk it down, or we allow it to kind of fill out, or something else to come up and prove it wrong in so many circumstances, that I wonder what the opportunity would be if there was just more visibility of what was really going on in people's minds. And I love the fact that actually I've seen a bit more of that with this switch to digital, with people using chat function whilst other people are talking. I felt people able to kind of share what's going on in their kind of their mind chatter whilst people are talking, to be part of a conversation. And I think that's a really positive thing that I'm seeing happen in those online kind of team conversations and meetings. And I really hope that gives power to the inner voice, for people to get more recognition. When you get a thumbs up for a comment that you've put on the side, you wouldn't necessarily get that in the room. You might get a look or a nod, but if someone's paying attention to something else, they've missed it. Whereas in the chat, it's held for someone to come back when they finish their sentence and go, oh yeah, that's a really good point. So there's a little bit more opportunity there for people to really listen to what's going on in everyone's minds. And I wonder how we can maintain that. And as I said, dial up the volume potentially.
Yeah, and keep it going even though you're maybe face to face again. Like making sure, because I guess there's a question for me. If I'm used to Teams, and you're right, you kind of get that dopamine hit, and you feel good when someone likes something that you've put out online. And it's the same face to face when someone not validates, but kind of go, oh, that was great, thanks for that comment. And I guess when we're talking about hybrid ways of working, and we're talking about shifting between maybe working a couple of days a week and then coming back to the office, almost the intention and more intentionality on, hey, that was good, giving that feedback, maybe in that moment that you wouldn't have necessarily done that in the past, but you have been doing it all this time on Teams, to suddenly not get it when you're face to face can be a subtle kind of jolt, and maybe perceived as a negative. And I guess it's kind of having that intentionality and that emotional intelligence to make sure that you're doing that in the moment, and you're putting that kind of even though it's a face-to-face I don't know if that makes sense, but it was interesting what you were just saying.
Yeah, it does. And I think, some people did that really well. And I think sometimes I've walked away from meetings where I've thought, actually, I could have amplified that voice, or I could have strengthened their point. And something that I have learned to do, certainly over the years as a leader, is not let that go, is actually then go to someone and say, I really liked that point, and actually I think we could build on that. Let's bring it to the next meeting. So I've taken action where I've recognized in reflection that something more could be done. And I think that's really a core part of self-reflection, particularly as a leader, is being able to catch yourself and still act. So yes, we might have missed the perfect moment, but have we missed is that the only moment? Because I don't believe it is. There are many moments that we can use to support others in all different types of ways. And this obviously comes into allyship as well, where people are developing confidence and strength to find their own voice, where people are learning and growing to be able to have more influence in different circles and in different ways. How can we use that self-reflection to still use action and to still act and make use of and create more moments without having to always feel like we've missed that moment that was perfect?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've thought about leadership maybe in those moments. So you've missed that moment, but also what blocks you maybe from having those additional moments. Because I'm sure there are many people, I've definitely done this, where you have the moment, you go, oh, I've missed that moment to just give that piece of feedback or something. Okay, I'll wait for the next time, and then the next time never really happens because you just put all of these blockers in the way. And maybe that's your own voice, embarrassment, you don't want to go back, you think you've missed it, actually feedback should be given in a moment, so I've missed my shot, all of these voices internally. But actually what you're kind of saying that was interesting to me when I was reflecting on my own behaviors was actually, no, just maybe go for it intelligently, but just make sure you create that moment again, because we're going to miss the perfect moment from time to time.
We are.
Lead on perfect.
I think you tapped into something really important there as well, which is the fear behind actually using that moment when it comes up. And I think that's more important than ever in terms of self-efficacy, bravery, courage. A lot of people have bravery and courage in their organizational values, but what does that really mean? And actually it comes from situations where people have been criticized for saying something, or have gone for what they thought was the perfect moment, and something has happened negatively as a result, maybe fairly or even unfairly. And what I'm seeing now, and experiencing myself as well, is that even in the most positive intentions, someone is not going to agree or even understand your intention or what you're trying to do. And more so now than ever, openly discredit or talk you down in any way they can, whether that be in person or even anonymously, to the point that actually can really damage how confident you feel as an individual. And I think, Gavin, as a leader, being able to work with that and keep going and keep trying is what's going to be really critical going forwards, because you can't give up as a leader. You can't stop at the first knockback. You can't just get feedback or criticism in a way that you don't understand and you can't talk to because maybe it's not accessible, and not go on, because then what's the point? Everything you've done leading to that moment is about being able to work with that and lead through it and keep going and role model that actually things aren't easy. Things are super hard, and super hard for leaders at the moment and CEOs. And we need to really think about, how do we help people understand the difficulty and the context of what they're working in and still keep going. Yeah,
and it's been really interesting when we've been talking about kind of first line manager, new manager, even future leader programs, and the skills that people are wanting to be building in those programs. And resilience obviously comes up a lot, but that kind of self-awareness around, well, why was that a fearful moment for you? What was it about your own beliefs and your own belief systems and the stories that you tell yourself and have been told in the past that create that identity of who you are? And actually it's about stripping back or testing and hypothesizing some of those stories and actually breaking some of them down and going, well, I've been told that all my life, but that's not actually true. It's something that just has been created and I've gone with it, and we can challenge. And I think that's really important self-awareness that we need to be building in all of leadership and team, actually, because everyone, again, coming back to our original, everyone has that accountability for the culture. I think everyone is digging a little bit deeper into who they are and how to have those inner voices, and also how to have those authentic inner voices and have those less fearful moments when you're in the moment, because you're a little bit more self-confident, because you can kind of identify that emotion, you can identify that it's fear, you can almost identify maybe the trigger in the situation that you're in, and then you're able to respond. And that takes time to build that habit and that skill. But at least it's a little bit more intentional, and maybe you don't do it 100% of the time, but you're not doing it 5% of the time, you're doing it 30% of the time, you know, and that 30% could be the difference between getting a 57% turnover rate to a 15%, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, being able to role model the fact that you can do that in difficult circumstances, yeah. and not listen to potentially the difficult stuff sometimes that can really knock you, and yeah. Standing back up again and keeping on going through that is really, really hard in these times. You know, when people are being asked to be really authentic and really genuine, and then if someone picks out or criticizes a core part of you being your most authentic self, and we know that can tap into all kinds of very negative behavior, but being able to keep going and saying, do you know what, that's not going to knock me, that's going to make me stronger, because I've recognized that I've been able to share a vulnerability in me, and perhaps maybe one voice that hasn't recognized the place you've put yourself in actually is not as important as maybe the other many voices of people who are saying, do you know what, actually, I think I can do this, because I've seen that happen, and they've kept going, and they've gone through something really hard, but they've shown that actually there's so much more opportunity. We're not going to keep everyone happy. We're not going to be able to be you know, exactly that perfect moment. We can't be perfect in all the moments, particularly if we're being authentic, you know, and listening to that inner voice and sharing what's going on in our minds. That's us being able to say, okay, I'm bringing it, and I'm going to keep learning, and I'm going to keep going. And yeah, exactly that. Maybe that's the piece, that's the so what piece of the 57.3% turnover that starts to see your turnover tick back down again, being able to say, no, I want to be here. We're a place where people stand up for what they believe in, stand up for who they are, and support others, either in the moment or afterwards, to continue just making those incremental steps to grow and learn, and support others too to do so.
Yeah. And we said right back at the beginning, it's always interesting how these things go in a cyclical. You know, we talked about ripping up the rule book, and actually maybe it's more subtle changes that are needed, and maybe we haven't been doing everything wrong. Maybe it's just something a little bit different, and maybe it's just a subtle change. That seems to me like a very achievable thing to focus on in the next 3 months, for people to just have that second moment. You know, you've missed the first moment, and that's okay, we're human. Make sure you make the most of that second moment. Yeah. Go out and make sure it happens. Have that conversation, have that difficult time, that difficult moment, face to face or virtually. Go in with positive intent, and labeling that positive intent. Going in with a voice that is, this was my intention, this is who I am, and I'm trying to be better because of what we're trying to achieve here. I'm not doing it just to be annoying or irritating. And kind of rolling into those conversations with that emotional intelligence and see what happens. And if it all goes wrong, speak to us, and we'll talk about it on a Friday Live.
Brilliant. I love it. No, that's fantastic. And look, time's gone so quickly. Thank you, Ant. What a really insightful conversation. Some of the points you've made, I'm going to sit here and think about it afterwards, and make sure that I do create those moments for myself and for others throughout the day-to-day, definitely. It's the beginning of a day here, and I'm looking forward to what the rest of this day is going to bring us. So I hope everyone listening has enjoyed listening and being part of the conversation today, in whichever way you have been. And I look forward to continuing the conversation next week, but enjoy your Fridays. So take care.